Johnson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It is perfectly clear from listening to the Right Honourable Gentleman, the Leader of the Labour Party, that he is joining with his Shadow Chancellor and his Shadow Brexit Secretary, and now determined to frustrate Brexit and the result of the referendum in 2016. It's absolutely clear from what he said just now. But I must regretfully say to my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, I really can't believe that there is a single member of this House who sincerely believes that this deal we have before us is a good deal for the UK.
There are a lot.
And if I may say, you can tell. There we go. There's one. There's one. There's one. And I must say, I said sincerely. I said sincerely. And you can tell that the government's heart.
Order. Forgive me. Oh, sorry. Point of order, Mr. Edward Vasey.
I sincerely believe it. I've got no stake in this government anymore, but I still think it's the right thing to do.
Mr. Boris Johnson.
In which case, I'm happy to acknowledge the sincerity of my honourable friend, but I have to say that I think the government's heart does not appear to be in this deal, and I think listening to those who are sent out to defend it and to explain it, they know that it is a democratic disaster. In fact, after 2 years of negotiation, as has already been said, I think it has achieved an extraordinary thing in the sense that it has brought us together, finally. It has brought us together in the sense Remainers and Leavers, myself, Tony Blair, we are united. The whole Johnson family is united in the belief that this is I'm afraid, a national humiliation that makes a mockery of Brexit. And I'm sorry to say this, these are hard truths, but there will be no proper free trade deals as a result of this deal. We will not take back control of our laws. And for the government to continue to suggest otherwise is to do violence to the natural meaning of words. We will give up £39 billion for nothing. We will not be taking back control of our borders, Mr. Speaker. Not only have we yet to settle the terms on which the EU migrants will in future come to this country, but we will be levying EU tariffs at UK ports and sending 80% of the cash to Brussels. In short, we are going to be rules takers. We are going to be a de facto colony. And out of sheer funk, I'm sorry to have to say this to us, we are ensuring that we will never, ever be able to take advantage of the freedoms that we should have won by Brexit. And under the terms of the backstop, we have to stay in the customs union, while Northern Ireland, and therefore the rest of the UK, if we want to keep the union together, will stay in regulatory alignment unless and until the EU decides to let us go. And why should they let us go? By handing over £39 billion, we lose all our leverage in the talks. With a £95 billion surplus that they have with us in goods alone, the EU has absolutely no interest or incentive to allow us. I will happily give way.
I'd like to thank the Right Honourable Member for giving way. The Prime Minister gave us 7 reasons why the EU will not be using this backstop. The Attorney General yesterday made it completely clear that the backstop, if it ever came to place, would be challengeable under EU law itself. I say to my greatly respected colleague that I think he is promoting Project Fear, because what is his option?
Order, resume your seat. I'm sorry to have to bark at the Honourable Lady, but the intervention was just too long. End of. No, enough. Boris Johnson.
A very good point, nonetheless, Mr. Speaker, because it's exactly on the point. Because as I've been saying, the EU has no incentive whatever to let us out of this backstop, precisely because they have this massive trade surplus with us. And furthermore, they have, when they look at UK manufacturing and UK business, they realise that they will have, in that backstop and through the whole of the implementation period and beyond, unchecked and unmediated power, effectively to legislate for the UK, with no UK representation. And if the Honourable General Opposite thinks that's an ideal situation for this country to end up in, then let him speak now.
The Right Honourable Member talks about an ideal situation. The Right Honourable Member was a senior member of Vote Leave. He was Foreign Secretary for 2 years. We are in this mess because of him. Does he take no responsibility?
No. I do not. I'm grateful to the honourable member, but the fact is that I'm afraid I was not able to continue to support this process for precisely that reason. They know if the House will allow me, I will just make some progress. They know that having that regulatory control over us, they would have no incentive, as it were, to take the foot off our neck. And they will have us in permanent captivity as a memento mori, as a reminder to the world of what happens to all those who try to leave the EU. And this is a recipe for blackmail, and it is open to any member of the EU to name its price. If my honourable friend will allow me, I'll just make some progress. To name its price for Britain's right to leave the backstop. The Spanish will make a play for Gibraltar, the French will go for our fish and for our bankers, the Germans may well want some concessions on the free movement of EU nationals, and so it goes on. I'll give away in just a second. The worst of it is that we have not even tried properly to leave. And the worst, or shown any real interest in having a different future. And I will give way to the honourable gentleman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I thank my right honourable friend for giving way. The Prime Minister at the dispatch box today was generous. She made very clear that for us to unify the country, we have to bring the 48% that voted to stay as well as the 52. Can I ask my right honourable friend, someone that was regarded in London as a unifying political figure, what would he do to bring the 48 and the 52 together?
I think that as I say, Remain and Leave have been to a very large extent united in their dismay at what I think is a wholly undemocratic deal. And the thing that really pains me, and the gentleman opposite asked about the role of ministers in this. And I have to say that we on the UK side of the negotiation, I think, have been responsible for forging our own manacles, in the sense that it's almost as though we've decided that we needed to stay in the customs union and in the single market in defiance of the wishes of the people. And we should be careful about... I'll give way to my honourable friend behind me, who's been chuntering away from a sedentary position from behind. I'll give way in a minute. We should be careful about claiming any kind of subterfuge. But it is very hard to understand how... We've lost 2 Brexit secretaries in the course of these negotiations. It's very hard to understand how the former Secretary of State for the Department for leaving the EU could have been kept in the dark about the crucial addition to paragraph 23 of the political declaration, my honourable friend, where this country agreed, in paragraph 23, apparently without the knowledge of the elected politician concerned, that our future relationship would be based on the backstop. No one campaigned for that outcome. No one campaigned, no one voted for this type of Brexit. This isn't Brexit. This is not Brexit, but a feeble simulacrum of national independence. It is a... I'll give way in a second to this gentleman here. It is a paint and plaster pseudo-Brexit. And beneath the camouflage, we find the same old EU institutions as the customs union and the single market, all of it adjudicated, by the way, by the European Court of Justice. If we vote for this deal, we will not be taking back control, but losing control.
I'm very grateful to the right honourable gentleman for giving way. He appears to be one of those who prefers the grievance to the solution. My right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, has come up with a solution. What's his big idea?
I was coming to that, Mr. Speaker. You anticipate.
Order! Members must not shout across the chamber at the right honourable gentleman. It's extremely unseemly. Order! I've no doubt that the right honourable gentleman is well able to look after himself. I'm not really concerned about him. I'm concerned about the reputation of the House. Boris Johnson.
Mr. Speaker, well, I've been told by your leave that I have an unlimited time to speak. So I will come to the solution that my honourable friend craves in just a minute, because the solution is, in fact, I'll just make some progress. If we vote for this deal, we are not taking back control. Indeed, I would say to colleagues, friends across the House of Commons, I would say that we are part of a representative democracy, and voting for this deal will be not just, as it were, turkeys voting for Christmas. It's actually worse than that. There is a sense in which, of course, we would be voting for Turkey, or Turkish, as my right honourable friend. That's exactly true. That is exactly true. We'd be voting for Turkey in the sense, or Turkish-style membership of the customs union, obliged to watch as access to the UK market is traded by Brussels, but with no say in the negotiations. And of course, the kicker is that with its veto, the EU ensures that the backstop they impose on us is more subservient even than the arrangements that the Turks have. And it's a wonder, frankly, that's absolutely true, it's a wonder that any democratic politician could conceivably vote for this deal. And yet I know, one second, and yet I know that many good colleagues are indeed determined to do so, in the belief that we have no alternative, or that we've run out of road, and, as we've heard earlier on, that Brussels will offer us nothing else. And I want respectfully to deal with those anxieties, which I'm sure my honourable friend shares.
Okay, well, given that my right honourable friend appears to be unwilling to enter into an understanding of what negotiation is, can we take it from that my right honourable friend has actually only ever meant that no deal is a good deal, because he does not believe in having a deal with an institution which he is philosophically opposed to, and windmills that he tilts at every turn?
I may say with great respect and admiration to my honourable friend, I do not philosophically oppose the European Union. I simply think that membership of the European Union for the purposes of the UK is no longer right. And that was what I campaigned on, and I think it was, and I think the British people were completely right. And as for no deal, no, I don't believe that no deal is the option that we should be going for automatically. But I will come to that in just a minute. I want to deal with these anxieties, but I know that my honourable friend shares, because I do think that he is profoundly mistaken, as indeed are all colleagues, in thinking that we have absolutely no option but to go ahead on this basis. We have plenty of other options. And I think in order to see the way ahead, we need to understand what happens on Tuesday, next Tuesday, if, as I very much hope, this great House of Commons votes down this deal. And I'll tell you what happens. And you've got to put yourself in the mind of our counterparts across the table in Brussels, because I tell you, in Brussels, they think they've got us beat. They do. They think that our nerve will eventually fail. They think that the Prime Minister will come to the summit next week, and in the event of this deal being voted down, and ask for some cosmetic changes. And I expect that they will think about granting some cosmetic language that is intended to be helpful, but which does not change the legal position. And I think in Brussels they are confident that sometime before March next year the government will come back to this House, and they think that this deal will go through somehow or other, by hook or by crook. Because, as everybody keeps saying, there is allegedly no alternative, and the Norway option will be seen for what it is, an even worse solution than what is currently proposed. The notion of extending Article 50, delaying the date of Brexit, would be greeted, I think, with fury by the electorate, as indeed would any attempt to amend the terms of exit so as to plunge us back into the customs union. That would be rumbled by the electorate as well. So I will give way with pleasure to my honourable friend.
Thank you very much, my honourable friend. Is he not concerned that trying to win 7-0, he may lose 4-3?
I understand exactly the analogy that he speaks of, but I've heard it said by defenders of the government that we may be 1-0 down at the end of this first half of the negotiation, but that we're going to win 2-0 or 2-1 by the end. And I have to say that I don't see it that way. If we go on like this with the backstop in the way that it is, I believe that we will be thrashed out of sight. And I have to say that I will come to Carol in a minute. I think I've already given way to you. Mr. Speaker, I will come to Carol in a minute. Having studied the UK negotiating style in detail, I don't think that they believe we...
Order. There is excessive noise in the chamber. My understanding, insofar as I can hear, is... Order! Calm yourself. Is that Mr. Johnson is not currently giving way. Boris Johnson.
Given way, I think the House will agree quite a lot so far. And I'm very happy to give way in the future. But I just want to come to the point that has been raised by honourable friends around this. Just one second. They think that we've got nothing left in our tank, and they think that we want to do a deal at any price. And I think that now is the time, as we all think about this vote and what we are individually going to do, now is the time, thinking about the attitude in Brussels towards us, for us to show that they grossly underestimate this country and this House of Commons and our attachment to our liberties, because there is an alternative and there is another way. And we should not pretend after 2 years of wasted negotiations that it is going to be easy. But it is the only option that delivers on the will of the people, but I believe also maintains our democratic self-respect as a country. And that is to say, what is obvious from this debate and from every poll that I have seen, we should go back to Brussels. We should go back to Brussels, and we should say to them, yes, we want a deal if we can get one. And yes, there is much in the withdrawal agreement that we can keep, notably the good work that has been done on citizens. Notably the good work that is done on citizens. And a gentleman opposite, Corbyn from a sedentary position, he compares the European Union to Lavrov and Russia. I have to say, I think that's an entirely inapposite comparison. These are our friends. These are our partners. To compare them, I think, to Russia today is quite extraordinary. And we should say that we appreciate the good work that is done, that has been done to protect the rights of citizens on either side of the Channel. But we must be clear. We must be clear that we will not accept the backstop. Because it is nonsensical to claim that this backstop is somehow essential for further progress in the negotiations. And the question of the Irish border is for the future partnership and not the withdrawal agreement. It was always absurd that it should be imported into this section of the negotiations. And we should use the implementation period to negotiate that future partnership, as I believe the government itself envisages. And by the way, we should withhold at least half of that £39 billion until the negotiation is concluded, the negotiation on a new partnership. And I think if we did that, I hope that answers your question.
That's a big idea.
I think it's certainly better than your idea. I believe the EU will sense. I will give away the pleasure.
The right honourable gentleman for giving way. It's a simple question. Is the deal that's currently on the table better or worse than staying in the European Union?
I'm afraid it's a finely balanced question, and much will depend. Much will depend on what happens. Much will depend on what happens after the vote on Tuesday. And I believe that if we say what I propose, the EU will understand that the government has found its resolve and is willing to be tough at last, and I believe the EU will do a deal on those terms. But in case they aren't, and I think I'm going to anticipate my right honourable friend's question. I bet I know what he's going to say. In case they do not agree, we must be absolutely emphatic now that we are preparing urgently for the possibility that we will indeed have to leave before we reach a final agreement. And yes, I'll give way. If that wasn't.
I mean, what we're voting on is a withdrawal agreement on 3 points that have to be settled before the big, wide, grown-up negotiations start on the future relationship, on a very wide agenda over the next few years. What he is suggesting is we reject this withdrawal agreement now, in December, before we March leave. We go back and say we're not going to pay our contribution to any legal liabilities and any continued access, and we're not at this stage going to guarantee an open border in Ireland. Does he think there's the faintest chance of that being listened to seriously by any other member government? And isn't he just dooming us, if he gets his way, to rush to a catastrophic no-deal?
I must say I don't agree with that at all. I think obviously we should state, which is agreed amongst all, that there will be no hard border in Northern Ireland. All sides agree to that. As for the legal liabilities to pay the £39 billion, those are, to say the least, contested. And I believe that it is additionally vital to do what we've failed to do so far, and that's to show that we have the conviction and the willingness to leave without an agreement. And yes, I agree that will mean a great national effort if it comes to that point. And yes, it will mean that we have to make sure that we can get all the goods to our ports in addition to Dover, and we'll have to ensure that the planes can fly and to address all those other questions. And by the way, I will come to
I thank the right honourable gentleman for finally giving way. And he's presenting an illusion of the EU not being good for the UK. I would just ask him, does he also think Euratom is not good for the UK? And if so, can he explain to those currently waiting for cancer diagnosis and treatment where they're going to get their radioactive sources from?
I'm glad to have given way, because I really think that that's the kind of scaremongering about the consequences of leaving the EU that really does no favours, I must say respectfully, to the debate. And I think that the Treasury will have an opportunity to ensure that this is in the event of no deal, in the event of coming out without an agreement. The Treasury will have the opportunity to use that £39 billion to ensure that we can support the economy rather than talking it down. And I believe it would be far better. It would be far better to make that effort now and at least be responsible for our destiny than to agree to give up our right to self-government forever, because that's effectively what we were doing, just because of our lack of short-term competence or confidence. And quite right, just 1 second. Quite frankly, the EU will not treat us as a sovereign equal in these negotiations unless and until we are willing to stand up for our own interests now and in the future. And I tell you, Mr. Speaker, I think our country is ready for us to take this stand? I think they are, because I think they've had enough of being told that we can't do it, that the 5th or 6th biggest economy in the world is not strong enough to run itself. And if we fail now, Mr. Speaker, it won't be good enough. I've given away a great deal. I've given away a great deal. I've given away a great deal. It won't be good enough to say to the fishermen, our fishermen, that we can't actually take back control of our fish because in the end it all proved to be too difficult. And it won't be good enough to say to the people of Northern Ireland that after all those promises, to the people of Northern Ireland, after all those promises, we accept that they must be treated differently from the rest of the UK. And I will give way to that.
Very grateful. He talks about the avoidance of a hard border in Northern Ireland. Speaking to the DUP conference at the weekend, he said that if Great Britain chose to vary regulations, there'd be need for regulatory checks and customs borders between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Does he accept then, in some future world where the United Kingdom can vary its regulations as a whole, that would inevitably lead to regulatory checks between Northern Ireland and the rest of Ireland?
It is certainly, as Michel Barnier, I'm very glad that my honourable friend has raised that point, because it's a very, very important point. And Michel Barnier has himself said that these technical solutions to implement such regulatory checks, not necessarily customs checks, but regulatory checks away from the frontier can be found. And that is what we should be doing. And frankly, that is what we should have been doing for the last 2 years. That is where our effort and our energy should have gone. And on that point of regulation, it won't be good enough. It won't be good enough to tell the people of Northern Ireland they're now going to be treated differently. It won't be good enough to tell the business people of the UK, that now and in the future, they are going to be burdened. They are going to be burdened with regulation emanating from Brussels over which we will have absolutely no control, and we couldn't stop it because we couldn't see an alternative. And I must say to colleagues that if colleagues think that it is too disruptive to go now for the Super Canada option, if colleagues think it is going to be too disruptive to go for freedom now, just you wait until you feel the popular reaction that will follow when people realise that the referendum has been betrayed. And the tragedy, I'll give way with pleasure to my honourable friend.
Honourable friend for giving way. Could he tell us how his cunning plan, which ends up with no deal, will secure the 485,000 jobs that rely on the automotive sector and the just-in-time supply chains, which he first heard about 6 months ago from the Secretary of State for Business and Industrial Strategy? I won't comment on the when I heard about just-in-time supply chains. It was many, many years ago. But the objective, as she knows, is to create a zero-tariff, zero-quota deal with the EU, which is readily deliverable when you consider that we already have zero tariffs and zero quotas. And as for her anxiety about job losses, I have to say that we've already heard a lot of prophecies about losses of jobs. I think it was said that we were going to lose 500,000 jobs in this country if the British people had the temerity to vote leave. Actually, we gained 800,000 jobs. So I take these prophecies, I'm afraid, with a pinch of salt. And the sad thing is, that too many people, indeed some of the people who've been negotiating this deal, seem to regard Brexit as a disaster to be managed rather than an opportunity. And I'm afraid they also see bad news. They see bad news as a vindication of that judgment and actually talk up bad news as a result. And in taking that attitude, I'm afraid they are badly misunderstanding the instincts of the people of this country, who didn't vote for Brexit out of hate. They didn't vote for Brexit out of hate, as I think the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff tweeted after the referendum. But they voted to take back control of our laws because they believe and I think rightly, that if we govern ourselves and if we legislate in the interests of the UK economy, then they have a better chance. They have a better chance of good jobs and higher wages and cheaper food and clothes and a brighter future, all of which are possible under a proper Brexit, and none of which can be delivered by this deal. And above all, if we vote through this apology for Brexit, we will be showing that we have treated the 17.4 million people, the highest number of people ever to vote for a single proposition, with contempt. With contempt. We will be turning our backs on those people. And this country must understand that when the people of this country voted to leave in 2016, they voted for change. They did not vote for an endless transition or a thinly disguised version of the status quo. They voted for freedom, and they voted for independence, and they voted for a better Britain, and for a country where politicians actually listen to what the people say. And I may say to the House that if we try to cheat them now, as I fear that we are trying to cheat them, they will spot it and they will never forgive us.